Hello everyone, I'm your host Sagarika and welcome to my channel, A Questioning Mind. There are a total of 121 languages and 270 mother tongues according to the 2011 census of India. And if anyone knows the difference between the both of them, do write me below. What it does say, though, that the richness, the cultural diversity that has been discussed over the decades is an inheritance that must be preserved at all costs. And still, in a land of many languages, the poor child of a laborer going to the free school with negligible facilities is expected to learn and learn in English. What can't be denied is that the English language education helped India leap swiftly to the top of the pile when it came to becoming the BPO and offshore services provider to the rest of the world. What can be argued upon, though, is that it offered strategic benefits at a global scale. Look, France, Russia, China, among hundreds of other countries have continued to be part of powerful interest groups on a world stage without resorting to enforcement of English language education among its own population. To be clear, this video is not an anti-English rant. Obviously, you and I are communicating in English. That would be extremely hypocritical. This is only a means to provoke thought about how entire systems can be and often are disrupted through language. Its power goes beyond gossip, beyond what you and I are doing right now, and into building and killing cultures and regimes. It functions as a force of emancipation and expression, as has been often discussed at our many literary festivals and events, as well as of insulation. Today, I will focus on the aspect of insulation. On a geopolitical strategic interest scale, India is aligned to and friendly with several powerful nations. The diplomacy and deals are helping relations with Israel, France, Australia, and the UK get stronger and better. But let us for a moment look at France. The common man and woman have exposure only to what they consume every day in a language that they are familiar with. They are unlikely to delve into strategic international relations events, especially from a non-partisan perspective. So when they read headlines like, "In India, Hindu extremists do not joke with humor," let me just pull that one up for you. That's a good one, refers to, and it's in French, so I've just done the translation. I do not actually speak French, although I wish I did. So this one says that in India, Hindu extremists do not joke with humor. As you can see, it's a pretty loaded headline, and the people consuming such opinion pieces on a regular basis know to assume a little poorly of the country and its inhabitants, possibly as contributing author Ravi Pinto meant for them to. France's Le Monde, which is the newspaper that I just pulled up, it's one of the most trusted newspaper and regularly employs India beta Christophe Jaffrelot to write along the lines of Indo-European rapprochement readily adorned with the garb of democracy, to insinuate that a completely functional elected government is usurping its political leverage. Now, this does not have to do with a particular party in power. It's just to do with the Indian people at large, as you know, I will show you. And you can also click in the description box below to access these links. You can go through the articles yourselves, have them translated. And France has an extremely high readership of French news as compared to English or other newspapers. From a purely linguistic perspective, this will isolate readers to narrow ways of thinking that French newspapers and their stakeholders have interests in promoting. I can go on for hours citing Le Monde's oldest archives that remain consistently anti-India, regardless of our government's engagement of the parties in power at the Indian or the French centers. With a large readership, even in French-speaking African nations, Le Monde uses WhatsApp to take their news abroad. Compare this now to Indian coverage of France, which is extremely kind, as can be expected, since India does respect its, at least Indian publishers do respect our strategic partners. And this is what we say about France in our English newspapers. So as you can see, while India has also helped France during this period, very difficult period, we do call out how France has joined our country to help with necessary equipment, etc. So let us then compare this to Israel's most popular newspapers, such as the Jerusalem Post or the Times of Israel. Let me just fold those up for you now. You will see the entire roll of news. It's very current. You can see since the Indian Miss Universe was crowned in Israel, they have taken a particularly large interest in that, as well as the rest of the news. This is not necessarily positive. If you go through the archives, again linked below, you will see that it's not always positive, but it's certainly less narrow and much more neutral. It's also in keeping with Indian publications' own coverage of Israeli issues. Now let us come closer home from the global perspective. Let's come to our own states. Language has been used as another divisive tactic for political gains. It's not something that's unknown. Once religion and caste were thought to have been well utilized enough political concerns, language came to the rescue. After all, you can beat a dead horse only so many times. So take, for example, Marathi news and media outlets that helped the anti-Hindi, anti-migrant fervor in 2008 and 2009, although much of the economy in Maharashtra was dependent on labor from other states. The mobs participating in the attacks were certainly used by political forces, but also had been fed a certain narrative that was sometimes debated by other perspectives on Marathi channels, but that really left the consumers unaware of the effects of such activity on the economics within their own state. It can, of course, be argued that people are easily guided by all the media they consume, regardless of language, which I do agree with. Today, though, I will continue to focus on the power of language to isolate and insulate. The Tamil-Hindi divide has been especially discussed, and as more and more people become more connected via the internet and English language education, which has allowed people from both sides of the Vindhyas to cross over and mingle, the divide is slightly less visible than it used to be. Prior to this, we've had several riots, and I will link below some of the articles that will help you go back and read the news about how particularly difficult those riots were for the people living, whether they were anti-Tamil riots in Mumbai and anti-Hindi speaking riots in Tamil Nadu. Language, however, remains an extremely potent force to rile passions. It would certainly help to have Tamil be taught in schools in the northern parts of the country and Hindi in the southern parts as means of compromise, but the sheer improbability of that task at this time makes it a bit of a pipe dream. However, with a prime minister from the north who speaks in chaste Hindi, invoking Tamil poetry at one of the country's holiest sites in Kashi, the recognition of language being a prime connector is not missed by this government. Albeit politically expedient, it is a step towards ensuring that if one step is taken by one side, the other can or even must follow suit to not miss a potential political opportunity. Unfortunately, in many northern areas of the country, Southerners are treated as stereotypes, as exemplified by media such as the immensely popular Tarak Mehta Ka Ulta Chashma, where the sole South Indian character is not even essayed by a Southerner. The power of linguistic isolation has not been lost upon different politicians, and increasingly in states such as Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka, the language fault lines are being exploited for political gains, leaving the citizenry exposed to fewer and fewer ideas, along with a false sense of linguistic exceptionalism. In many ways, for an English-educated demographic of young Indians used to Netflix and Amazon Prime, bringing the latest global shows from across the world, consuming only English language content has also functioned as a factor in their lack of exposure to different points of view. The superimposition of foreign constructs onto indigenous concerns, or several things, including gender issues, the use of surnames in the Indian context as a means of discrimination, are being relatively unnecessary to different cultures with different naming conventions. This is something I will build upon in a later video. even to outrightly framing terrorism as rebellion or militancy is something that people isolated in English language media consumption can get bogged down by. Soft power is a potent tool, and in a country that honors its truly diverse cultures, appropriate respect for the power of language has mutated into divisive force, ripe to be exploited at the expense of the poorest. Lack of a common language other than the colonial vestige of English is forcing the continued repression of opportunity and access to the parts of the country, while shaping narratives in strategically important nations. The populist solutions include the resurrection of Sanskrit as a possible link language, along with the wider usage of Tamil across the country. At this point, I remain optimistic that the spread of the internet will help bring people different perspectives, perhaps overcoming the barriers of language. However, I look forward to a time when we discuss nuances and perspectives in multiple languages without an attempt at homogenization by English. It's a tough ask and one that we are absolutely capable of committing to. Please leave your thoughts about how you view the use of language, especially in terms of isolation and insulation, and how it should form part of our soft power exercises internally as well as abroad. And I will see you soon with another video. I do have a few exciting guests lined up for the next week and the week after, so please do stay tuned. Leave your thoughts below, and I would love to see you again in my next video. See you soon.